All right. Hey, Holly.
Hi, Dave.
How are you?
I am great. How are you?
I have been better. I was recording what I thought was a recording with Glen Sobel, but
On the What Difference Does It Make podcast?
Yes. So we're starting all over again. All right. So we have Glen Sobel with us. You probably know him as the drummer for Alice Cooper. He also is the drummer for Hollywood Vampires, featuring Alice, Joe Perry, and Johnny Depp. 2016, he's voted the best hard rock drummer in Drum Magazine. If you know Shep Gordon, you may know he has a benefit New Year's show, and he's played with Steven Tyler, Michael McDonald, Sarah McLachlan, and Weird Al, among many, many others. I mean, what is that like being in a house band? Because it's different style. I mean, I just mentioned 4 different artists that are completely different.
It's fun, but it's a lot of work. It's both. But I do that kind of thing often, not just at that event, but like at my residency in Hollywood. It's a club called Lucky Strike, which is a bowling alley. It's high-end, nice, super cool bowling place, but it's also a club venue with a great stage and sound system. And every month we do a residency gig and we back up different guests. And so it's similar. And so it's learning songs, and it's a fun gig.
Who, for example? Who have you backed up there?
Boy, we've had Nuno Betancourt from Extreme, and Steve Vai, and Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine, Orianthi, who we were talking about earlier. We've had a lot of cool guests.
So what's that like, though? I mean, you have how much time to rehearse something like that?
Usually, things like that, it's like a sound check rehearsal. You're rehearsing the day of or the day before, sometimes, if everything is set up at the venue the day before. But you're expected to show up knowing everything. And I read music, thanks to being in middle school band and high school marching band, orchestra, etc. All that reading music, it all helped towards what I do now. So I'm able to chart things out, and the structure of the songs and the breaks and any important little transitional parts, I can notate it. And that's what you got to do in situations like that. You have to show up, and then there's going to be changes that get made. Maybe the front person, the singer, wants a different ending, and you have to notate it on the spot and be ready to make it happen.
When did you start notating? Is this something you picked up when you first started playing in middle school, or is it?
Well, I was learning to read for sure.
Right.
With taking lessons, starting I was in 8th grade when I started, but I started playing drums in 7th grade at middle school, Hale Junior High, where I actually just went back to speak to the middle school students, which was great. But first I learned to read, which I always tell drummers how important that is. You don't want to be an illiterate drummer. You want to know what it is that you're playing. But then much later, when I was starting to actually play professional gigs, I would notice that drummers would do this. One of my mentors, Greg Bissonette, played with David Lee Roth in the 80s. Mm-hmm. That was his first big thing that really put him on the map. But he was playing a lot of different gigs, and I was his student. He's a mentor of mine. So when I was 18, 19, I was studying with him, and he showed me and his other students how he would chart out songs, like a shorthand, not writing out note for note, but sort of charting out the structure, a roadmap. And eventually, somewhere down the road, I started doing that, because it's like, wait a minute, you don't have to memorize everything. Mm-hmm. You have it all on a music stand right there, and the act of writing it out helps you internalize the song. So it made sense to do that.
When you're in Maui, you have to. Okay, so Michael McDonald will say, "We're going to play what you know."
Yeah, usually ahead of time we know what we're going to do, but there's always a last minute 1 or 2 guests that get added. But yeah, with Michael McDonald, it was great. He usually joins us every year. He lives in Maui along with Pat Simmons from the Doobie Brothers. So we end up playing some of that stuff like Long Train Running, which is Without Love, Where Would You Be Right Now? People don't know the title of it as much. But that one, and What a Fool Believes, and Rockin' Down the Highway. And then we did one of Michael's solo tunes, I Keep Forgetting, which is his biggest hit. And I just want to show up with everything charted out. And if there's changes, you make changes. You bring your pens and pencils and erasers. It's very nerdy, but it's very necessary to be that kind of professional.
Have you ever been thrown for a loop?
As far as what?
If somebody has thrown a song in and you weren't totally familiar with it?
Well, if they're going to throw something in last minute, I would hope it would be something that we could get up to speed on quickly. But yeah, it's not unlike someone like Steven Tyler to throw something in last minute, although he was not there for this event this last New Year's. But the last minute guest that we found out day of was Paul Simon. He's showing up at some of the parties in Maui around that time, but we got word day of that he is coming to the thing tonight and he wants to get up and do at least one song. So it was a song called Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes, which sounds like it was from the same record as You Can Call Me Al.
It's Graceland.
No, it is on Graceland. Yeah, I figured it's that same kind of style and production. And so we just ran it at sound check. After listening to it, I made the quick cheat sheets. It's not a heavy arrangement, but still we wanted to get it right. And we had a percussionist, my buddy Andres Ferrero, who's the drummer in Hamilton on Broadway. Yeah. So he's a great drummer, percussionist. He handled the congas and everything. And it was great. We played down the song. We had Willie Nelson's son, Lucas Nelson, who's doing great as a solo artist himself
plays with Neil Young.
Yeah, and he's one of the co-writers of many of the songs in A Star Is Born. Mm-hmm. So he's a great music director, and we were there to play it with him and Paul Simon. And then Willie joined us. He wanted to do full band. That was another last-minute thing. At first, it was just going to be Willie and his son acoustically. And then we got word day before, Willie wants to do full band. So it was Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys, On the Road Again, and Good Hearted Woman. And had to go on YouTube that night, the night before, make the cheat sheets. But then they say, yeah, but you can't rely on that. Willie, you just got to kind of listen to him for when the changes happen. I thought, well, I at least want to know what it was originally. And then if there's a left or right turn he takes, I can at least know how to transition. And it was exactly what they said. It's like, listen, watch, listen to him. You can't just chart it out. That's being the drummer in one of those bands, hosting and playing with all these guests. You got to be ready for real-time changes that happen on the fly.
Yeah, it keeps you on your toes.
Totally.
I would imagine. Yeah. And you got to be pretty confident.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Do you have these moments where you have to step back and go, these are people that you probably grew up listening to, a number of these people. Do you have you take a second and go, okay, I got to learn, Sweet Emotion. And Steven's going to be singing this song. Let me just figure this out. Let me just have my moment, and then I'll be professional.
It happened at first way back. I mean, this is the 10th year I'm going into playing with Alice and doing these type of events. But back in 2011, the first year I was doing it, yeah, sure. We did a special gig at the Whiskey, special Alice Cooper gig where they put out some tickets on sale, but it was mostly an industry thing. And Robbie Krieger was going to join us for a couple of Doors songs. It's like, wait a minute. You mean Robbie Krieger's going to play Doors songs with us at the Whiskey where the Doors started? That's crazy. And then he walked into rehearsal. It's like, oh my God, there he is. That's Robbie. But now it's kind of become very routine. People are musicians first. I mean, they're icons, sure, but they make music and they make mistakes like anybody else does. And they're normal like everyone else, and you got to treat it that way. But sure, the other part of you might think this is nuts. Wow, look what's going on right now. But you got to be professional.
Right.
And the audience is forgiving too. I mean, if you're not note for note, I guess you just...
Well, it's not about note for note always. You want to go for that, but any little mistakes that may happen, the audience isn't going to notice. And part of being professional is covering it up.
Yeah.
Do you get sideways glances from leaders who I caught that. I know.
The drummer gets blamed for everything, man. Even if something goes wrong that has nothing to do with us, everyone looks back at the drummer with this look on their face like, save us, get us out of this.
And you do.
You do your best. Yeah. I mean, it happens. There's going to be mistakes and things that happen on stage, but one of the biggest aspects of being a professional is being able to recover from that mistake. And usually it's way worse in the moment. You feel this on stage, everything gets all slow motion if it's a bad train wreck moment. But if you happen to see a video of it later, usually the reaction is, that wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
And most people don't notice. I mean, I've seen bands have horrible train wreck mistakes on stage, and still most of the audience didn't know, or the person next to me is going, what happened? And I'm saying, they just, oh my God, they totally, half of them went into the chorus, the other half kept going, and most people aren't paying that close attention. So I'm cursed.
Well, okay. So did you learn this way back in high school? I mean, when, just to keep going, because I know, you have to learn, it's all written out, but you're always going to mess up, especially in high school, I think.
You got to make mistakes. You learn from it, but I was in drumline. You were in drumline. That is so precise. And you've got any number of snare drummers, could be 3, 5, 7 snare drummers. If one guy makes a mistake or is sloppy, the whole thing is sloppy, and it's so obvious. So I think being in high school marching band and orchestra, it really taught me that super hyper focus that I carried on to later life. And when you're the only drummer, there's some things that are easier about that. You're not playing with other drummers in a drum line. It's you, and you have to establish the groove and the tempo and the count-offs, and you just learn little tricks like using a metronome to start songs, maybe not keep it on the whole song, but I've got a little in-ear, like an earbud I put in just my right ear only, and I use my iPad and the metronome app, and I can at least start a song with that. And that guarantees that I'm on the right tempo, because there's nothing worse than counting it off and immediately the singer looks back, too fast, too slow, and it blows the vibe. I mean, singers will count it off and then they'll go, it's too fast. It's like, well, you counted it off, but it's still your fault as the drummer. You just get that feeling.
Audiences are always the worst. Whenever you get the audience to clap, they always start speeding up.
You got to ignore
it's always, you've got to really.
Some countries more than others, they speed up.
Really? Which country's the worst?
No, I don't want to throw any country under the bus. At Japan, they get kind of fast.
It's a different kind of appreciation. Throwing them under the bus.
They're excited.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you got to do your own thing, you won this. I was just looking on your Wikipedia page. You won this drum competition at 19.
Yeah, 19, 20. Yeah.
Was it? Okay. So you created your own drum solo, or what was this about? I mean, what was happening here at that?
That was the Guitar Center drum off, which became huge. They don't do it anymore. I think they stopped it 2 or 3 years ago, but it became this like major event where kids, their goal in life was just to win that. It wasn't, I want to be a professional drummer and make music with people. It was, I want to win the Guitar Center drum off. I mean, it was important back then, but they weren't like giving away cars yet or anything. They were eventually, but yeah, it was the Guitar Center drum off finals. And it was the second year I'd done it. And I remember thinking, if I don't win this year, I don't care. I'm never doing this again, because it's the most high pressure gig situation. Play a drum solo first. Like, it's not like you're playing a set of songs and in the middle there's a drum solo and you're nice and warmed up on your drums. This is this other drum kit, and you have 5 minutes to adjust it however you want, the stands and the heights of cymbals and whatever. And you have to perform this composition in a way where it's got a beginning, middle, and end, and you got judges. And the judges are celebrity judges. There was like Eric Singer, that's where I first had met him, and there was Peter Criss, and there was Pat Torpy, who became a good friend, and a lot of other guys. Chad Smith, I think, was a judge at one of those. And it's like, wow, this is just heavy. Do I want to do this? But yeah, I'm glad that I did. The second year I did it, I won the thing, and it led to my first endorsement as far as a drumstick company goes, but it doesn't get you a gig. I always say when I'm teaching that nobody ever got a gig from playing a drum solo.
But it's got to be a prestige thing and something for your resume.
Sure. It's got prestige attached to it. Yeah. And I got to know people in the drum industry, and it was good for a lot of things like that. But I knew that it wasn't going to be something that would convince people, oh, this is the guy we need for our band because he could play a crazy thing with double bass and polyrhythms. And that doesn't get you a gig. That turns people off, in fact, sometimes.
So is that what you were trying to do? Or for your first solo, were you trying to do it all? Like, oh, I can play these, like try and mix it up? Or what was the idea behind
it?
I wasn't trying to show off a whole lot of diverse playing. You have a style. You realize that you start doing certain things that are typical of you as a player. I saw what the categories were, because there's like quarterfinals and semifinals for something like that, and you hear what the categories are. They're like timing, showmanship, groove, originality. I thought, oh, originality, that's an important one, because then I judged it at different times years after I had won. And yeah, those categories, you got to think about that when you construct this drum solo that's got a limit of 4 or 5 minutes, and you got to practice it. The worst thing that can happen is you're just getting warmed up and time's up. It can fly by. So it was a high pressure gig for sure.
So how soon after that, after you won that, was your first professional gig?
I'd say just a couple of years, maybe a year. Yeah. About a year later, I was recommended by my mentor, Greg Bissonette. I was a student, like I was saying. He recommended me to Tony McAlpine, big time shredder. His first record was around 84. And I think it's credited as being one of the first true metal fusion records, heavy metal and jazz fusion kind of put together. The drummer on that was Steve Smith from Journey, who was a very accomplished jazz and fusion drummer. And I became a huge fan of his. I mean, I was listening to Journey before I was a drummer. Everybody loves Journey, but him as a jazz player was a very big influence on me. So he was on that record. I knew the record. Greg called me, said, I gave your number and name to Tony McAlpine's manager. Do you know who that is? I said, yeah, I have that first record, man. It was Steve Smith and Billy Sheehan on bass. And Greg said, well, start learning the tunes, get on it. And I got the gig. And I was so happy to be able to tell that to Greg later that, yeah, that gig you recommended me for, I got it. And we're doing a record. So that was my first real thing.
That's insane.
That's so cool.
Right.
It's still one of my favorite records I've ever done. The mix was good, and it was a very musician type record. The musos like that kind of thing. And so it's just the problem was by this time it was the 90s, and that shred thing was dying off because grunge just erased the slate with not just hair metal, but shred guitar as well.
So Holly, you enjoying yourself? You having a good time with Glen?
This is so great. I am so psyched.
Great. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back.
Let's get back to Glen. What was your first band, or what was there? I mean, you must have, especially in high school, it sounds like I gotta play with a band. I gotta play with some guys. Okay.
Oh, I was in a band with my best friends, and they're still my best friends to this day. It was called Bourbon Street, and we'd play backyard parties.
From the West San Fernando Valley,
Yeah.
you called yourself Bourbon Street.
Yeah.
Because?
I don't even remember why. I think it got named before I joined it, but I'm technically the original member because I'm on the first demo recording, whatever. That's how you count original members. Who's on the first record? There could be 15 people before it, right? But yeah, Bourbon Street, and we played backyard parties, originals and covers. And that was my first experiences playing clubs. There was Gazzari's on the Sunset Strip. That was where we played for the first time. Met Bill Gazzari, the godfather of rock and roll. There were those commercials on the radio stations back in the day. And it was like a Sunday night. No one was there hardly, but we were excited to play a club on the Sunset Strip.
Do you know what year this was?
Yeah, that was 88.
Okay, so yeah. Hair metal.
Sure, I was there.
What's happening?
It was 88, and some band backed out, and somehow we got added in there. It was the first time I played on a mic'd up set of drums. That's a big moment for a drummer. It was sound check, and the bass drum and the snare and the toms and the overhead mics, and that's like a very unbelievably godly feeling, because if you just play in a living room and rehearse with all this carpet and guitars blasting, the two guitarists are in a volume war with each other. As a drummer, you got to keep playing harder and harder. That's a good thing, though. You learn to really rock a drum set and not be a wimpy player. But then playing when it's mic'd up, it's like, oh my God, there's nothing better than this right now. Yeah, that's where I thought, oh yeah, I got to do this a lot more.
This is it. Did you go see bands on the Strip? Or
Sure.
what were some first shows that you remember?
Well, we used to go see the band, and remember, we were under 21, so we couldn't get into a lot of places, but there were places that were all ages or they were 18 and up. We'd go to the country club a lot.
Reseda.
Which was in Reseda. It wasn't Hollywood, but many of the Hollywood bands would play there. It was the San Fernando Valley's rock club, and it made sense to open a club there. They had a lot of people showing up, sold out shows. We used to see Shark Island a lot, which a lot of people may not know. They did get a record deal on, I think it was Elektra. I could be wrong. And they did put out a record. They had a single, got some airplay, but this was Richard Zerny, or Richard Black, Richard the Czar. This was the singer. And this is the guy that a lot of people, if they know Shark Island, they go, oh yeah, that's the guy Axl Rose stole some of his stage moves from. Because we saw him doing the snake dance way before Guns N' Roses came out, and he was doing that. But the cool thing was, years later in 2005, in a roundabout way, I ended up talking to Richard, the singer, on the phone, and I ended up doing Shark Island's reunion record in 2005. And for some reason, the drummer they had, he was not interested or not into doing it, but it was the other three original guys. And so for me and my best buddies in my band, this was like a special thing. I couldn't wait to tell them, guess who I'm doing a record with, Shark Island. And it was a fun experience. So we used to see them. We used to see Racer X.
I remember that.
Do you? Yeah. That was a band that had a lot of players go on to do some very big things, but they had a big following with the musician crowd. It was shredding guitars, but with a singer, Jeff Martin, and Paul Gilbert was on guitar, and the other guitarist was Bruce Bouillet. And those are actually two guys that I've ended up playing with in later years. Paul has a instructional DVD with some live band segments, and I'm playing on that with him, and that was a last minute call. So again, it was me calling my buddies, guess who I'm doing something. There was a lot of moments like that of me calling my old buddies from high school saying, guess who I'm doing a record, a show with, these guys that we used to listen to and idolize. A lot of that. That's like one of the funnest parts of the professional side, is playing with people you grew up listening to. But Paul Gilbert was in Racer X, and Bruce Bouillet, I did Bruce's last instrumental record from, I think it came out in 2014. And Scott Travis was the drummer, huge influence of mine. Went on to join Judas Priest in 1990. And he's become a good buddy. And it's just so cool that him and I sat down with a couple of drum sets one day a few years ago for like 3 hours. And I was telling him like, oh, you don't understand, man. You're such a huge influence. And he was this guy who's like self-taught, and he was asking me how to do some things. And it was kind of surreal, but cool. He's become a good buddy. And he's such an innovator in metal double bass playing. And then the bass player from Racer X went on to play in Mars Volta.
Oh,
so it's a band that had a lot of people that went on to do stuff. We used to see them, and oh man, Bang Tango, which I was in a band with the singer years later, Beautiful Creatures, with Joe Lestay, the singer. We were on Warner Brothers, and who else did we see? Kiss did a special show there, I remember, for Pirate Radio. We had to win tickets, and that was the place. That was a great, great club.
Country club. Yeah, now I think it's a Korean church or something like that.
Yeah, or it's a Hispanic church. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pass by it a lot.
Such a bummer. You too played there before they broke and played at the Sports Arena in 1983.
I think
they played
everybody,
in 1982. Yeah.
Everybody played there at one time or another. Metallica started there, and
yeah.
All right. So as you mentioned, double bass. I heard a story. I don't know if this is true. I've seen you play Hot for Teacher, and before the internet, you thought that Alex was actually doing like double bass work, like with just two pedals, right? Or was it?
Well, I never tried to figure out definitively what that was. I heard it and thought it was cool. And it was kind of obvious that it's multi-tracked. And a lot of people argue over what that is. I mean, it doesn't matter. Everyone's going to play it and do it their own way. But I think what he was doing was Simmons drums involved, and then floor tom, and maybe some bass drums. Some people thought, no, it's a motorcycle engine, man. And then there's drums, and who knows? I don't know Alex. I've never met the guy, but he's another huge influence, and it's a fun song to play.
Yes, but so you learned it, but just using your feet.
Yeah, right.
Without any motorcycle or Simmons drums.
No, it's hard to take a motorcycle to the gig.
Yeah.
Rob Halford does it, but it's a rudiment called a Herta. We didn't have a name for that rudiment back then. Now there's a name for that rudiment, Herta, and that's what's going on. And there is a video of me online on YouTube from playing that song at a drum festival in 2010. I had the little flip cam set up behind me, and it made the rounds. It got around a lot, and it's been brought up just like you're bringing it up now. No, but it's great.
Yeah,
it's circulated, and apparently Alex has seen it, and it's just great that kind of thing happens.
That's very cool. Go ahead.
Can I ask you about Motley Crue?
I don't know those guys. What about them?
Well, Dave told me off mic that you had filled in.
Yeah.
A lot of it is just being at the right place. You seem to fill in like someone, drummer goes down. There's Glen Sobel, steps right up to the plate.
Well, I'm not sabotaging anybody.
Right, exactly. But I just mean being at the right place.
Right.
Alice Cooper. Well, you can set it. You tell me.
Well, that was exactly what you're saying. It was being there at the time. We were doing Motley Crue's. This is funny now. Their farewell tour.
Yeah,
they're all done. No more.
One?
We will never hear from Motley Crue again.
Except now they're back. And no, but this was what was their farewell tour. 2015, we were on tour with them as the special guest. That's a little more than an opening act special guest. We did just about an hour-long set, had full production, and we did that for a good while on and off with the guys. And I had already known Nikki Sixx from way back in 2007. I did the very first 6 a.m. gig because that was a guitar player, DJ Ashba, who I used to play with. It's all about people calling you because they know that you're reliable. So in this case, Tommy Lee had a sudden flare-up of tendinitis. We were in Buffalo, New York, and I got a call in my hotel room from Crue's production manager. And I first met this guy years ago. He was guitar tech that was like known. This guy was one of the best techs in the business. So it was no surprise that he became a big production manager for Motley Crue and Kiss. He calls me and says, Tommy Lee has got a problem, man. He can't play the show tonight. Can you fill in? And the first thing I said was, come on, who's messing with me? I thought
He's punking.
Yeah, if I say, yeah, I'm down, let's do it. I thought I was going to hear a bunch of people in the background laugh and go, I got you. I mean, I really thought that's what was happening. And he assured me it was for real. I still wasn't 100% convinced when I was on the way to the venue, but I said, okay, have someone get a music stand with a light attached to it because it's a very dark stage. And have Adam, that was their sound guy, said, have Adam put a recording of one of the recent shows on a thumb drive so I could sit in a production office at the venue and chart out the show like I was talking about earlier, making cheat sheets, roadmaps, reading music comes in handy. People say, oh, but it's Motley Crue. You grew up on that. Yeah, but when there's bombs going off literally right next to the drums and Nikki Sixx has a flamethrower bass on Shout at the Devil, and Vince sometimes doesn't sing every word, and there's 15,000 people, you might get a little distracted. But I made cheat sheets of everything, whether I thought I knew it or not. And there's different arrangements when they were doing that tour to accommodate different pyro cues. Like on Primal Scream, there was an extra 2 bars of rest before the final chorus, just a giant explosion that, you know, if you don't have the in-ear monitors in, it would deafen you. I mean, we had pyro, but they made our pyro look like little firecrackers. So I did that on 7 hours notice, and sure, it was crazy because it's like, what did I just get myself into? But I had done things like this in the past. There was Italy's biggest rock star, Vasco Rossi, who I had heard of always, but then I got called to sub that gig last minute, and this was in 2010. And he's always had American drummers. That's why I had heard of him. He's had Kenny Aronoff and Jonathan Moffett from Michael Jackson's band. And a friend of mine, Matt Logg, great drummer, played on a lot of hit records that you've heard. He was doing the gig, but he had an injury in 2010. And so I got called last minute because the producer that called me knew I read music and could chart things out. It wasn't about playing drum solos like I was saying earlier. That wasn't going to do it, playing a drum solo. It was the skill set of reading music and adapting. So I had done that way back and learned a 25-song set of songs sung in Italian. And then days later, I'm in Sardinia, Cagliari, Sardinia, on the island, rehearsing with people I'd never met before. One American in the band, a guitar player, Steph Burns. But it came off. Like I was the wild card. They didn't know who else to call. Everyone else that had done the gig previously was not available. That's who they call first. So they called me, and everyone was really nervous, and I walked in that room and I had it charted out, and it was fine. And I was nervous, of course. The first show was 40,000 people.
Was that your biggest audience at the time?
I think at the time, yeah. Yeah, but I pulled it off, and that's a good confidence booster. So when the Motley Crue thing came up, it's like, well, I have done this before, and this is Motley Crue. I do know the songs from growing up, hearing them, being a fan, and then we've been on tour with them on and off for a while. So even being backstage, hearing the show in the background through the walls, certain things like pyro cues, they just kind of sink in by osmosis, you know? So that helped prepare for that gig, but it was such a whirlwind day. There was no time to really freak out or be nervous. I played the Alice set, and then a half hour later was the beginning of the Motley Crue set. And everything with what they do is on the in-ear monitors, and everyone gets the metronome or the click track. Not everybody knows what that is. But a lot of rock shows, when there's lighting that's automated and synced up to what the band is playing, it's all time coded. And so the band, or at least the drummer, has to play to this metronome, so it's all perfectly aligned. In this case with Motley Crue, musicians might find it interesting. The whole band would get the click track and the count-offs. And the reason I was able to figure that out way before is because they would just start a song without Tommy Lee counting it in. They were getting it in their in-ears. The audience doesn't hear it. And I'd say, oh, okay. They're all getting the count off. And nobody told me this before I got up to play. I didn't rehearse with them. I didn't sound check with them. It was just do the show. But it helped that metronome is there, because then the tempo is right on as long as you play with it. And this is a thing for drummers, practice to the metronome every day. Yeah. It's part of professional life. But yeah, and I had to guess certain things like, well, is this a 1-bar count off or a 2-bar count off? If it's 1, then I better be ready to go quick. Like on Anarchy in the UK, that's their Sex Pistols cover. I thought I'll bet this is a 1-bar count off. And I guessed right. Nobody was helping me. I thought, what? These guys are so nonchalant about this whole thing.
I don't think anybody thought about it.
They should have.
But they don't. But because it's, in the past, it's always been Tommy. Tommy's got this. Don't worry. Why would they need
They've
to
had
discuss?
subs before for Tommy.
Have they?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It had been a while, but no, one of the subs
who's the
was...
drum tech? Who was someone?
No, they would always call it other people. One of the subs was a good buddy of mine, Will Hunt, who's the drummer in Evanescence.
Mm-hmm.
But he had played in Tommy Lee's solo band way back. And he's done a lot of other cool gigs. He's been in Evanescence a good while. He played in Vince Neil's solo band, so he played Motley Crue songs a lot. He got called to do it years ago when Tommy messed his hand up somehow. And I called Will. I said, okay, what'd they pay you? But no, they've had other guys. Morgan Rose from Seven Dust. For a while in the 90s, Samantha Maloney was actually touring with them, the drummer from Hole.
Yeah, so they just assume drummers just know it intuitively. Right?
Yeah, that's a
lot of faith in drummers.
Yeah, everywhere. Well, drummers always get short shrift, right?
Well, you got to be, like I always say, just professional and be prepared. And it went really well that first night. There were no train wrecks, and I did 5 shows with them, a week's worth.
And Did you actually go in the
roller coaster?
Yeah.
Everybody asked that. I wrote it during the daytime. I wasn't going to do that during the show. That would have been a weird thing. The sub drummer is riding the roller coaster, because that's Tommy Lee's personality. Mm-hmm. He's so much more than a drummer. I mean, he's an important part of the sound of that band. Mm-hmm. I don't think people realize or give him enough credit. All of his tabloid antics overshadowed his musicianship, but he's a very important part of their overall sound. And when he would do his drum solo, he's got the headset mic on and he's talking to the crowd. I love you. What's up? He's doing that whole thing. And what would I do if what's up? I'm subbing for Tommy. It's like, no, people were disappointed that they didn't get the full lineup at what they thought was their last time seeing the band. But I did ride it during the daytime. I had subbed a few shows, and I was talking to Tommy. I said, Tommy, I got one question. Can I get a ride on the coaster? And he said, oh man, you got to try it. And so one day we arranged to get me down to the venue early, and it's hard.
Yeah.
It's very hard. The hardest part is not being totally upside down. That's weird enough because everything feels far away from you for some reason. No, when you turn and you're at a 45-degree angle, the harness digs into your stomach and it knocks the wind out of you. You can't breathe, but you still got to be playing. And so I got to give it up to him doing that every night. And I realized afterwards why they put Mick Mars's guitar solo right after the drum solo, because Tommy is backstage with the oxygen tank. Which I eventually started using on tour. A lot of drummers and singers do this, oxygen tanks.
I would think that would be really helpful, actually.
Yeah, it's good to get a quick hit of fresh O2, especially if there's pyro. There could be smoke lingering in the air, which we've done a lot with Alice. So reminds me, I got to renew my doctor's prescription for the oxygen. You need a prescription.
Man, we're having so much fun with Glen, but we're going to have to stop it right here, and we will return next week. So until then, this is Dave.
This is Holly.
Check you later.
Over and out.